This episode is powered by PodDecks.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the GOAT Talk podcast. Today, I'm joined by Spencer Fielding of the Full Court Talk podcast. And today, just a few days removed from the start of the NBA regular season, we're going to talk a little bit of basketball. But before we jump into it, Spencer, how you doing? How's your quarantine been?
I'm good, man. I just finished all my classes. I'm gonna go on winter break now. Just chilling and working now. How about you?
I'm the same thing with me. I just finished my classes Thursday, actually. So
Okay,
I'm
okay.
right there with it. I'm right there with it.
Yeah.
So I guess there's like a lot of the NBA offseason is so crazy. There's like you think there's gonna be a big headline, and then like hours later there's another one. So it's always difficult to know where to start. But I guess the biggest news of the offseason, Giannis re-signing, signed a 5-year supermax deal to stay with the Bucks. Which is just fancy NBA talk for he's gonna spend 5 more years without a championship. When you look at the team in Milwaukee, there's not much there that lends you to think that they're gonna have that championship in the next 5 years. Do you see that somehow happening? But between now and the time his contract is up, what was your reaction when you found out that he signed the supermax?
I was pretty shocked because in my thinking, being a Warriors fan, I saw KD sign 1-and-1s, which is a 1 year plus a player option.
Right.
And it's not often you see a guy just sign a 5-year max like this.
Right.
Especially even if they're Giannis's caliber, like you don't see this happen very often now. And I think the supermax was a good idea in option, like in theory, but like when you look at the stats about the supermax, it doesn't necessarily keep people in small markets. So it's a huge W for small market teams, obviously, but it's not you're giving the Bucks the leverage now, right? You're making it so they don't have to necessarily build the team around you. They already got you. That's all that matters to them. But what do you think?
Well, I think it's a blessing and a curse for the Bucks. I think when you sign with the offseason that the Bucks had, there was no real pressure. I mean, Giannis still had time left on his contract. It's not like he was in desperate need of an extension right this second. Granted, it was only 1 year. I mean, when you look at the numbers, it's the largest contract in NBA history. I mean, Giannis is a two-time MVP, and whether you want to dispute whether or not he, deserves those MVPs or not, he has them, and so this is what MVPs get. My only concern, as far as the Bucks is concerned, is Giannis coming into the season and really for the next few seasons has no pressure to win a championship because he doesn't have a team that can win a championship right now. So all the pressure is on the Bucks. I think this is rare. Usually what you see is teams mortgaging their future for the here and now. I mean, we see that with the Clippers, which is something we'll talk about a little bit later. But the Bucks signing Giannis, like you said, it's a win for them because they have Giannis for another 5 years. But that doesn't necessarily mean that if Giannis, changes his mind, is like, I want to win and I want to win now, that he's not going to want to force his way out. Like there's no guarantee that you do that. The other thing too is with these big contracts, you can sign a supermax, but there's also no guarantee that maybe 2 or 3 years from now, Giannis won't want to revisit this contract and try to, alter it and then sign a longer. So it works for Giannis because he's getting his money. It works for the Bucks because they're keeping Giannis for at least 5 more years unless something crazy happens. I just and I guess in a way it extends their championship window. I just don't see. I don't know. I just don't see Giannis finishing out this contract. I mean, he said openly that he's not really about he said openly that you don't really get remembered for what you do unless you're winning, and they have been winning. I mean, they were on pace to win 60 games before the season restarted. They won 60 games the year before, but it's just tough. It's just really tough. I mean, when you look at what's happening in Brooklyn, obviously Philadelphia is still going to be there, especially if this James Harden thing goes through. The Celtics are still going to be there. The Raptors are still going to be there. Like, you got all these teams. And then you've got other teams like the Wizards who are expected to be back in the playoff picture. You got the Hawks who had a nice offseason. They're expected to be fighting. So it's like it's all these. The East is. This isn't the same East from maybe 20 that time when LeBron was in the Heat. This is a much different, more competitive East. I don't I don't think Giannis is getting out of the East, especially not this season. With KD and Kyrie in Brooklyn, but I don't see Giannis getting out of the East over the next 5 years unless we get one of those crazy injury plagued seasons like we had, last season or the season before. I just don't see it.
Yeah, and I think to touch on the East, like you said, like they've gotten insanely better. Not only is KD and Kyrie there, but you still have to deal with the Celtics, who are still a really good team. They're an up and coming team. The Raptors are getting a little worse now because Kylie's getting up there in age, but there's still going to be a team you have to deal with. And even going to the West is insanely loaded. So you're still going to have to deal with them once you get to the finals.
Right.
And essentially the finals has been for like the last 20 years just fully on the Western Conference. It's basically the Western Conference Finals is the finals.
Yeah.
And getting to the finals is pretty easy.
When you look at it, I'd say if you look at just the last 10 years, I mean, you had the Lakers win the championship in 2010, 2011, it was the Mavericks. I mean, and then you have, 2012, it was the Heat, 2013 is the Heat, 2014, it's the Spurs, and then 2015 Warriors, 2016. For the last 10 years, it's been, this has been the finals has been a Western Conference. It's been owned by the West. And it's been like that really for the majority of the 2000s, I would say from the 2000s to 9, that's really just how it's been. I think when you look at the 90s, it leaned more to the East, but that's because Jordan and the Bulls won 6 of them at the tail end of the 90s. But when you look at from 2000 to now, the last 20 years, like you said, it's been mostly West. I think the other major concern too about this is, and we've talked about this before, the Bucks have an amazing front office. I think one of the biggest mistakes that they made was not giving Malcolm Brogdon his money. I think that's where they failed. I think, and the reason why I say this is because there are places where you could send Malcolm Brogdon to get pieces back. Even if you're not going, you can sign him and trade him. That's fine. We see sign and trades all the time. And I think where the Bucks has failed is even if obviously signing him and keeping it is the best bet because you have to have shooters around Giannis because Giannis can't shoot. In today's NBA, you can't win a basketball game without shooting threes. Like if you're just going to trade threes for twos, you're going to lose. And the lack of Malcolm Brogdon, I think, really hurt them last season because they didn't really have a reliable shooter. I mean, they had Dante DiVincenzo, who is a streaky shooter at best. They had, Brook Lopez and Robin Lopez, who are bigs, who were shooting like 2 or 3 threes a game. Then you have Chris Middleton.
Arguably, they regressed last year.
Right, and they definitely regressed. And you have Chris Middleton, who was an all-star last season, but he's not a guy that you're going to rely on to hit a clutch shot. Not saying that Malcolm Brogdon is either, but I would rather have Malcolm Brogdon taking the shot than Chris Middleton. They don't have that right now this season. I mean, they have Drew Holiday, who's not a bad shooter, but he's not known for his shooting either. He's known for his ability to be a floor general and he's not a defensive liability, which is something else that the Bucks needed. They needed a guy that can play defense. So they addressed their needs. I just don't, and they obviously got better. I mean, getting rid of Eric Bledsoe is obviously a plus, even if they didn't get Drew Holiday, because he was a liability all last season. I don't think they extended the championship window as much as they may have thought. I mean, again, this is a big win for Milwaukee, like you said, in terms of keeping Giannis, but there's no guarantee that Giannis won't want out. I think this upcoming free agency 2021 is really going to be a big one because that's when a lot of the you got Bradley Beal and guys like that who are really going to be available. I think if the Bucks don't try to make a move for some of those big names, we're just going to be looking at the same old Bucks winning 60 games in the regular season or close to it and making it to the second round and that's it. And when you talk about legacy, that's going to be Giannis's legacy. He's going to be the MVP that couldn't make it to the finals if he can't get out. It's
going to be like Tracy McGrady.
Absolutely. And it's difficult too. It's difficult to get free agents to willingly sign with small market teams. We see it all the time. I mean, you see it with Utah, you see it with Milwaukee, with smaller market teams. That's not a free agent destination. So they gotta hope for the best. You're not getting a KD or a Kyrie in Milwaukee. You're going to be getting guys. You're going to get guys like Drew Holiday. You're going to get a guy like Andrew Wiggins. Like low tier 2, high tier 4 type players in that range wanting to come to small market teams. And that's just the reality of the situation. They got to make the best of it. I mean, I think they definitely a big swing and a miss with Bogdanovich. I think that's a big miss in terms of, when you talk about shooting, he's one of the more consistent shooters in the league right now. But it's just hard to build a team around Giannis, especially now with the money.
Yeah.
Money is going to be a big factor as well in terms of signing free agents. So the team that they have right now is likely going to be the team they have moving forward, unless they can try to trade pieces. But if you're trading pieces, you're giving away something, and
You're hemorrhaging your future at least.
that's really the crux of the issue, is that they're giving away something. Like
Yeah.
Chris Middleton, if he keeps on improving the way he's improving from last season, he was part of the 50, 40, 90 club. You keep doing that, he's gonna be a max contract player, at least in Milwaukee. Combine that with the Supermax, that's a lot of money. Drew Holiday, when they revisit his contract, he's gonna want to get more money. So it's really difficult to try to build pieces in today's NBA with the luxury tax and the salary cap and all that good stuff. It's good for the future, but I don't think it's great for the future. And that's really the issue that I think we're facing right now with Giannis and the Bucks.
And to touch on the salary cap, like it's good for the big market teams, the New Yorks, the Bay Area, the Los Angeles. Like it's really good for them because they can easily go to the luxury cap. Look at the Warriors. The Warriors are paying the most that any team's ever paid before, right?
Yeah.
But then when you look at small market teams, they're screwed.
Yeah.
The Bucks are already trying to cut costs. We already know that. We did it. They did that last year with Bledsoe, right?
Yeah.
So it's good in a way that the big market teams get better, and that's where the NBA makes their money.
Yep.
So for the NBA, it's good, of course, but for the small market teams, it's tough. Building a winner is nearly impossible.
That is true. Let's talk about one of those big market teams, the Rockets, which I'm a fan of. So it pains me every time I have to talk about this. James Harden wants out. He's made that abundantly clear that he wants out. The arrival of John Wall and Boogie Cousins are doing nothing to push the needle in the other direction. So I'll try to be as objective as possible, although it's difficult. It is evident as a fan and as someone that watches basketball, you cannot have James Harden with this type of behavior where he wants out. It's never a good idea to have a player that wants out still on that team. It's bad for locker room morale. They're still going to go out and they're going to perform, at least in basketball, so to speak. In football, it's like, I just won't play the holdout. We don't really get holdouts in basketball. But I do think we're trending in a direction where over the next few years, we will start to see players hold out like they do in basketball if they're not getting what they want. It is best for the team that James Harden is traded. I think it's just a matter of where James Harden is traded to. Obviously, Philadelphia is at the top of his list, and it makes the most sense because of that connection from Daryl Morey out there in Philadelphia. My only concern with trading to Philadelphia is obviously Ben Simmons is on the table. I think that's obvious. I think Daryl Morey knows that he has a better chance of winning a championship with James Harden and Joel Embiid than he does with James Harden and Ben Simmons. I think anyone that turns on basketball and just watches basketball knows that. The problem lies in what else, who can provide the best package that will not only be like equitable in terms of I'm giving you James Harden, you're going to give me something that I can use that makes sense, but also is it going to fit with this new system? Because this is no longer going to be a small ball isolation Houston Rockets team. We were seeing this so far in the preseason, and granted it's the preseason, but still, this is going to be a much more motion-oriented pick and roll offense through John Wall and Boogie Cousins, and you got to have guys in this system that's going to work. You have to have shooters, and when I'm looking at the 76ers, they don't have many shooters. Now they have Seth Curry, which, I mean, obviously he's a Curry. So he's a career like 40% shooting from threes. So that's obviously something not to frown about. And if you can include Seth Curry in a trade package, that'd be great. You've got, but then there's other guys like Tobias Harris and Tobias Harris is a nice player. He doesn't at all play like the money he's worth. It's just really difficult. I think while the 76ers are the most likely team that he'll end up with, I think from a standpoint of trying to get an equitable amount of what you're giving up and productive, I think it would be better for us if we are looking at the Heat. I think, especially looking like Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson, both of those guys are shooters. We saw that in the finals. I think the Heat is a strong option. I think it's possible that you could see if he can get traded to the Bucks. Again, the money is weird though, but like if you can trade him to the Bucks for I don't know, maybe like I'd say like I guess like Chris Middleton and like some picks or something like Chris Middleton, Dante DiVincenzo, some picks or like Drew Holiday and like a bench player and some picks. Like that's where I'm looking at in terms of getting us a deeper bench. That's where I'm at with it. I can't really forecast on whether or not I'm confident in our team until this happens. The season starts next week. Chances are nothing's going to happen next week. So we're all going to have James Harden at least in the first, at least through the end of January, likely is how long we'll have him at least. I'd say that's really when the trade talks will pick up. If he's not traded by the trade deadline, that's when things get really interesting. For me personally as a fan in terms of like what he's going to do on the court, knowing that he's going to have like now you're stuck here at least until free agency and try to force your way out again. But
yeah,
when you think about James Harden, I mean, he wants to go to the Nets. We're not going to get anything from the Nets. Like,
well, I think the Nets can offer a pretty good package. I think it's going to rely on how the Rockets are going to use John Wall and Boogie, because you still have Christian Wood, and Christian Wood is really good.
Wood is really good. He is, yes.
Yeah, and I think you could get like a Karis LeVert, who is going to be really good.
Absolutely.
A Spencer Dinwiddie as a backup. You can plug some holes with the Nets guys. So you can have maybe a lineup of like John Wall, Karis LeVert. At small forward, who is your small forward? Eric Gordon.
Eric Gordon is a small. See, that's the issue too. It's like you got Eric Gordon, you got PJ Tucker, who, for all intents and purposes, are very reliable in the rotation. I mean, Eric Gordon's a former 6 Man of the Year. Tucker's a former 6 Man of the Year candidate. So both of them are, again, they're going to start looking for money. Not that they're going to be looking for a lot of it, but I mean, the bright side of all this is moving James Harden is moving a large lump sum of what we're paying right now.
Yeah.
And gives you a little bit of room to maneuver in terms of signing free agents and things like that. I think, like I said, see, the other thing too is even though James Harden has a lot of power within the organization, I don't want us to approach this as just giving James what he wants. Because like if James is saying, no, I want to go to Philly, and we're only looking at Philly, but like, and I'm just throwing this out there, say like, I don't know, like the Thunder or like some other team is like giving us a package that we think works. I'm not going to send James to Philly because he wants to go to Philly. I'm going to do what's best for my team. I mean, you look at the Spurs, right? Like Kawhi wanted to be in LA. That was a fact. But at the same time, the Spurs were doing what was best for the team. And like, we don't really care what you want. We're worried about what we want. We can get you out of here, sure. Now, if you want to get to LA, you have to take that up with wherever we send you to. We can get you out of here for sure. You don't want to be here. We can get you out of here. So for me, for the Rockets, I'm looking at we can get James out of here for sure. But there shouldn't be a guarantee of, okay, we're going to send you exactly where you want to go. I think we need to look at it from the aspect of we're going to send you where we're going to get something back that we can use so that we can still be in the title hunt. Because you have to remember, the Rockets have been a top 3, top 4 team in the West for the last 4 or 5 years. And the only reason why we haven't been to the finals is because of historically bad shooting nights on several occasions. I mean, you look at the 2017 finals or in the 2018 finals, 2018 more than 2017 because of the injuries. That should have been the year that the Rockets make it to the finals. But what did it take? It would have taken a historically bad shooting night for the Rockets to lose that game. And what happens? We shoot like 13 of 60 from deep.
Yeah, didn't you guys miss 27 straight?
It was historically bad. We missed 27 straight threes. And the problem with that is the dude that was the reason why we were in that position, James Harden said, I don't want to play with him anymore. And so we sent him off. And that's the other thing too. James Harden's style of play is not a style of play that is going to win championships. And it's not a style of play that is going to lend itself to work with other superstars. We've seen it 4 times already. They gave him Dwight Howard. I don't like Dwight Howard. Get him out of here. Okay. We'll give you Chris Paul. You want Chris Paul? We give you Chris Paul. You don't like him? Get him out of here. You want Russell Westbrook? Get Russell Westbrook. And a year later, he's out of here too. So I can understand. I can understand the trepidation in that. But again, it's just not like a good a good it's just not a good style of play. All right, welcome back. We had some technical difficulties. We were talking about James Harden's style of play not working with other superstars. Go ahead, Spencer.
Yeah, and like I was saying, like iso ball isn't what it used to be. You can't win, like you said, like you can't win solely on iso ball, and we've seen that time and time again. You can win regular seasons with that, but you can throw a couple of double teams and James Harden will give up as soon as you throw a double team. Like we saw it during the Christmas game last year. He was walking up the court doing nothing.
Yeah.
And if he's a leader, and if I'm playing with a leader like that, I'm looking like, man, what the hell is this guy doing?
Absolutely.
Like, it's frustrating. It's gonna piss me off because my leader's not doing anything. So, can James Harden change at all? Because when he used to be with the Thunder, beginning with the Rockets, like he was really good. Attitude was non-existent.
Yeah.
And now we see that he's kind of turned into a diva.
Right.
And it could be how the Rockets have treated him and put him on a pedestal, giving him what he wants every time.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things. Now, you can argue whether or not when you look at guys that have the powers that James Harden has been given in the Rockets, you're looking at guys like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron, guys like that. Now you could, and those are all, three of the greatest of all time, no matter what order you put them in. Now you can argue that James Harden doesn't have the cachet of those three gentlemen. And I mean, and again, considering that they're in the GOAT debate and he's not, you would have a reasonable case for that. I would lend over to the fact that it's not so much that James Harden isn't on their level. It's just what James Harden means to the organization. You have to look at where the Rockets were before James Harden, which is, bottom of the pack in terms of the Western Conference, drafting high every draft. You get James Harden. Also, James Harden is like, if I'm not mistaken, and off the top of my head, I can't really think of anyone else. James Harden is like the only guy in NBA history that I can think of that went from being a Six-Man of the Year candidate to one team to being an MVP winner on another. Like I can't think of anyone else that's happened for off the top of my head. So when you can transform an organization that drastically in over while the time you're there, of course you're going to be given certain power. You're going to have a say so in who's brought in and who's brought out. Yeah. You're going to have you're going to be allowed to do certain things. You're going to get away with certain things. And I think because he has that power, I think he deserves it. I think we're just at a point now where he's abused it. And I think because he's abused the power, that is even more reason why you have to say, look, we're going to get you out of here, but you no longer have a say so in anything that goes on. You want it, I think at this point, the office needs to sit down and be like, you want it out, we'll get you out, but you don't have a say in where you go. We're going to send you to the place that's best for us. And I think that's honestly where James needs to look at himself and say, hey, they gave me all of this and I still couldn't deliver the championship. So I can continue to he can continue to point the finger at CP3, Dwight Howard, Russell Westbrook. At some point though, they're all gone. They're off to better things. Dwight Howard on the Lakers just won the championship last season. CP3 led the Thunder, who had a less than 2% chance of making the playoffs last year, to be in a position to make the playoffs. I mean, they didn't, but they were in a position where they could have if the season never was halted, they would have been in the playoffs without a doubt. You look at Russell Westbrook, he's gone. He's going to be in DC alongside Bradley Beal. We know what Russell Westbrook's style of play in terms of him being similar to John Wall, what that looks like along Bradley Beal with the team that they have. We know that they're going to be in playoff contention. So at some point, you can't just keep pointing the finger. You got to look at yourself. And the other thing that's really going to hurt, I think, is should James Harden leave and this Rockets team still be in playoff contention, whether it's, in that lower 5 to 8 or in that where they still were in that 1 to 4, that's going to be a tough situation, I think, for James to swallow, especially when you consider there's also no guarantee that he goes where he ends up and they're just going to give him all the same power that he had before. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to get it's going to be a true wake-up call wherever he goes. He doesn't have the same power and the cachet that he had when he was down in Houston.
Yeah, and if he does go to a smaller market team, you're going to get those owners that just want him because he's gonna bring the fans. He's
Abs-
not gonna be there to win games. That's not gonna be his job. He's gonna be there to dazzle the fans, essentially.
Right. So I do want to, speaking of power, I want to switch gears just a little bit to talk about the Clippers. Obviously the Clippers were, last season, they signed Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard basically held the franchise hostage, saying, "You give me Paul George, I'll come. If not, I'm going somewhere else." Sam Amick, he's a senior NBA writer, works for The Athletic, USA Today, Sports Illustrated, Fan House, Sacramento Bee. He's very renowned, very knowledgeable. Yesterday, he tweeted that the NBA launched an investigation into the Jerry West Clippers allegations surrounding the Kawhi Leonard accusation that were detailed in a TMZ report earlier this week. He followed up that tweet saying that TMZ report published on Monday a detailed lawsuit filed by Johnny Wilkes, alleging that Jerry West owed him $2.5 million for his role in helping the Clippers land Kawhi Leonard. The NBA, as reported, has deemed it concerning enough to investigate. And then in the statement released by the Clippers stated that the lawsuit filed by Johnny Wilkes is replete with inaccuracies and the allegations are baseless. The Clippers are fully cooperating with the NBA in its investigation, which is standard when these types of allegations are made. They are providing the NBA with evidence that the allegations are false. Johnny Wilkes is, if I'm not mistaken, Kawhi has a lot of friends, but you don't really know who who his friends really are. I'm not sure if Johnny Wilkes is the same person as Uncle Dennis. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Nonetheless, though, Johnny Wilkes is claiming that Jerry West owes him $2.5 million. And essentially what this is being investigated for is because this could be tampering. Now, the reason, this is good that they're doing it, but it kind of doesn't mean anything, being that Kawhi has already played with the Clippers. Now, it'd be different if they won the title last year, then the investigation has some type of potential punishment. I mean, of course, you could obviously suspend Jerry West. You could suspend Kawhi Leonard for the season. You could do that.
Yeah.
I mean, which I guess would be the course of action, being that they didn't win the championship last year. I think they win the championship last year. You're looking at a situation where the NBA is going to strip them of the title last year. I think should these reports come back to be true, should the allegations prove to be true, and this really is the case, I think that would be the NBA's course of action. I think right now, the only thing that could happen would be that Jerry West is suspended indefinitely. Kawhi would be suspended for the season, something along those lines. When you look at the Clippers, though, obviously Paul George just signed his big extension in the offseason, which I don't understand how.
Yeah.
But you look at the Clippers, who were built to stop LeBron and AD. Obviously, they didn't. They lost to the Nuggets. Are the Clippers? Excuse me. Are the Clippers? Thank you. Are the Clippers the biggest threat to the Lakers in the West?
No, I don't think so. I think they didn't do enough this offseason to me. And they still have to have they're relying on so many what ifs to me. Paul George has to play well, and he's kind of regressed over the past couple of years. Going from that MVP caliber season, and then coming to the Clippers and just kind of showing his diva side. He's been kind of weird lately.
Yep. And
they've showed that both of them together cannot play well. Like Kawhi and Paul George just don't play well together for whatever reason. We've never seen them both go off in a game. There are so many problems within this Clippers organization. This is just the cherry on top, I think. But I mean, if you look at it, the Nuggets are a very good team coming back. They lost some of their bench, but they're still a really good team. No one wants to play against Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. They're a very good duo. The Trailblazers got a lot better getting Robert Covington. Even the Warriors, they looked really good during the preseason. Steph Curry is back. And I think there's just too many things in the Western Conference that are going to be good. Like the Phoenix Suns even look a lot better. Chris Paul just takes that team to another level. So it's just like the Clippers keep having these issues come out. And this time it's from another outside source. And before that, you could tell it was the inside people releasing all of this information. So the Clippers have kind of turned back into a laughingstock. And it's not for losing this time. It's just for being so dysfunctional.
Right. I can't help but mention you didn't mention one team. I think the biggest threat to the Lakers this season is the Mavericks.
Oh yeah,
I
them
think
too.
I think Luka Doncic, without a doubt, is going to be the MVP this season. I think that is written in the stars. When you look at the way he was playing last season, the just the he's a walking triple double. Like the fact that no matter who he's playing up against, regardless of the day, regardless of when it is on the schedule, he's going to show up and he's going to give you a triple double every time he's out on the floor. The scary thing about Luka Doncic is he has so much more he can improve on. He can definitely become a more reliable shooter from three. He can definitely become, a better defender. Like, and when you look at Luka Doncic and that's just Luka. We're not even talking about Kristaps Porzingis, who, obviously they're going to be careful with him through this first month because he's coming back from that injury. But I mean, you look at the Mavericks in a situation where, if you want to be, honest and technical about it, they should have beat the Clippers in the first round if it weren't for that crazy ejection that shouldn't have been ejection by Kristaps Porzingis in the first round. The Clippers wouldn't have even made it to the second round of the playoffs. They would have been gone in the first round. They would have been bounced in the first, and then that's even more reason to question, like you said, the Kawhi Leonard and Paul George combination. Here's what I think the issue is specifically with Paul George, though, and it has nothing to do with his inability to perform in the playoffs, because that's an issue as well. And I think this is all Kawhi Leonard's fault. I'll preface it by saying this. Kawhi Leonard, like I said, essentially held the Clippers organization hostage. He said, if you want me to come here, you're going to get me Paul George as well. Kawhi Leonard, two-time champion, 2 times Finals MVP. People can argue whether he's the best in the world or not. He's an elite defender. He's an elite offensive scorer. He can give you 27 and 7 a game. He's going to lock down your best player. That's undeniable. So the special privileges that Kawhi gets, it's understandable. Paul George has 0 championships, 0 Finals MVPs. He's had 1 MVP caliber season, and he finished 3rd in the voting that season. He doesn't show up in the playoffs. And so when you take all of that into consideration, you can't honestly look at Paul George and say he deserves the same treatment as Kawhi Leonard. But because Kawhi Leonard handpicked Paul George, he's getting that treatment. And I think that's where the issue lies with Paul George, because I think Paul George is, to use a boxing term, he's fighting above his weight class right now. Like, he's being treated like he's the best in the world, and he's far from it. Again, Kawhi Leonard has a claim for that. You could make a legitimate argument that at one point in time, as recently as 2 years ago, Kawhi Leonard was in fact the best player in the world. You can even make an argument, if you wanted to this day, that he still is the best player on the world. And depending on who you ask, they would tell you he is. Paul George has never, ever been in the conversation for being the best player in the world, ever. Even in his MVP caliber player, he wasn't even a top 5, top 10 player that season. So when I'm looking at Paul George, Kawhi Leonard is a quiet guy. He's not a guy that's going to galvanize the troops. He's not a guy that's going to be like in the middle of the huddle on like the mic'd up and like amping up the crowd. That's not how he is. He's going to go out there. He's going to do his job. He's going to give you that 27 and 7. Paul George is the guy that's supposed to do that. But when you have guys in your locker room that don't like you because you're getting treated the way you don't deserve, it makes it difficult for people to want to follow you. And that's one of the reasons why he had that issue with Montrezl Harrell last season. I mean, Paul George, like I said, take nothing away from Paul George. But like you said, he's regressed over the last few years. He doesn't show up in the playoffs. And I think ultimately him getting his extension is really a spit in Kawhi's face, if you want to be honest, because he didn't do anything. He wasn't instrumental at all. Consistently, every single game they played in the playoffs last season, all 13 of them, he had a bad game.
Yeah.
At least 2 bad games in both of those series. Kawhi had maybe 1 or 2 bad games, and it just so happened that both of those games were in the series against the Nuggets. He had a bad game 6, followed up with a bad game 7. Paul George was struggling from the start, and granted, mental health, all this stuff, that's fine, and that's a reasonable, but still, I would say, despite that, once you claim that you've bounced back from that, and now you're in this series with the Nuggets, you see Kawhi is struggling and you're also struggling.
Yeah.
Like, you're also not hitting your shots. You're hitting threes off the side of the backboard. You're airballing layups. You're doing this. You're doing that. You're not looking good. It's not a good look for the Clippers. On top of that, when you consider Kawhi Leonard and his load management and all that stuff, you know the chemistry is not going to be there this season either, despite the fact that we're likely to have a full 72 game season this year. The Clippers are going to once again, they're going to do last year they're going to do this year what they did last year. They're going to escape the first round by the skin of their teeth and then get bounced out in the second. I don't see the Clippers making the Western Conference Finals. And if they do, when you look at how monumentally great the Lakers got after the championship season, which has like never happened before, they don't have a claim for the championship for the next 3-4 years even. I don't see it. I don't see it. And I think after this season, that combination of Kawhi and Paul George will be broken up. And I think Paul George is going to be the one to leave.
I think, like, just to touch on this real quick, Paul George has shown that he's a liar. He
Right.
lies to every team that he leaves. And not only is he a liar, but he like never takes any kind of credibility for any mistake that he makes.
Right.
He makes a bad pass, he looks at you like, man, why didn't you catch that? Could be soaring into the Raptors, and he's been like, man, why didn't you catch that? And I think like that kind of leadership, because we know that out of the two, he's going to be the vocal leader, is demoralizing. Because for that kind of person who doesn't deserve the kind of respect that he gets, and to be like kind of held on a pedestal that he doesn't even deserve, and for him to be telling you like, you should have caught that, like, it's demoralizing for a team. That's why Pat Bev probably doesn't like him. Lou Will hasn't said a thing about him getting traded because he probably wants out. Trez already said he left. He full on left the Clippers. So you're seeing a lot of these like key bench players from 2 years ago that took the Warriors to 6 games. Just kind of flip. And I think it's all on Kawhi and Paul George because their attitudes are just not there. And like we've seen ego-filled teams, and they've won championships.
Right.
But this ego-filled team is just insanely dysfunctional. And it just comes down to like Steve Ballmer being like, I'm gonna throw whatever I can, throw the best talent out there and see if we can win. That's just not how the NBA works. You need to have chemistry. Chemistry is gigantic in the NBA. And you can tell this team just never built any of it.
100%. And you mentioned ego, and I just, when you look at the Clippers, it is scary to me when you look at the Clippers and switching gears a little bit to look at the Nets as well. It is very likely that we can get a situation in Brooklyn like we have with the Clippers.
Yeah.
When you look at Kyrie and the things he says, and I just like, he doesn't make any sense ever. And I don't know what it is. But Kawhi Leonard doesn't make sense. And so he was talking to the media the other day, and it was his first media day, and he says, it's really just, I don't remember what the question was, but whatever the question was, he says, it's really just about how I feel about the mistreatment of certain artists when we get a certain platform of when we can make decisions and within our lives to have full control and ownership. We want to perform in a secure and protected space. Now, I would assume that the question, and I don't remember it exactly, I think it had something to do with why he doesn't like talking to the media or something like that. That answer, if you don't know the question, because I don't know the question actually, that answer has nothing to do with that whatsoever, like at all.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going to find. I think that's going to be the big issue with Brooklyn. When you look at the things that Kyrie is saying and the way he handles himself, I think it's going to be an issue. That's Kevin Durant's team. We know that. Everybody knows that. Kevin Durant's the best player on that team. He'll be the best player on the team from the time the ball tips off until the triple zeros on the clock in the fourth quarter. Kevin Durant, that's Kevin Durant's team. If Kevin Durant wants Kyrie gone, if the Nets are looking, like if the Nets really are a serious potential landing spot for James Harden, and KD goes, hey, get him out of here. Kyrie is on the next flight to Houston. I Hope they don't do that because Kyrie and John Wall is not going to work. I
Yeah.
would hope that our front office is smarter than that. But I mean, but you get what I mean. Like that's just not. It's not. Kyrie holds himself like he's the guy. We've seen, and we've talked about this several times. We've seen Kyrie is far from the guy. You look at what he said about LeBron, although he said it wasn't about LeBron. He says, I finally got a guy on my team who I can look at him and say, he can make that shot too. But then you look at LeBron, and when LeBron and Kyrie were on the same team, LeBron hit 14 game-winning shots. Kyrie hit like 7. So you got a guy that's doubled the amount of game-winning shots you've hit, but now you're saying, oh, I got a guy on my team with KD, and I could and he couldn't have been talking about anybody else. Like he's not talking about Jason or Jaylen Brown. He's not talking about Kevin Love. He ain't talking about Marcus Smart, Timofey Mozgov, Tristan Thompson. Like, who else would you be talking about? Like we're not an idiot. So I think the ego of Kyrie Irving is going to be the fall of the Brooklyn Nets because the expectation of the Brooklyn Nets is a championship. Obviously not this because of how like we've touched on how much better the Lakers got after a championship season, which has never happened. But we're expecting within the next 2 to 3, I'd say 2 to 4 years, the Brooklyn Nets are raising a banner in Barclays. Kyrie Irving is going to be the reason they don't if he can't get his ego in check and leave it at the door.
Yeah, and just to talk about this, KD has been amazing through his preseason games, and he had 25 last night, and he looks the same, arguably.
Right.
And on the floor, purely on the floor, Kyrie and KD look like an amazing duo. They could easily score 25 a night, both of them. And this is going to be a really good basketball team if they can keep everything else in check. And that's something that I think is going to be super difficult. Like you touched on, Kyrie is a guy that just doesn't know when to keep his mouth shut, I guess. He just says some weird stuff. We've seen it it's really developed since he left Cleveland.
Yeah.
And he's been a really weird guy. And it's kind of started when he said that the earth was flat. So it's just kind of blossomed into this thing. Kyrie is just really weird. And it seems like KD's okay with it. He was okay with the staging. I mean, people clown Kyrie for that, but
I
did the same thing.
I turned on Twitter and they were like, "Oh, he's saging," and I was like, "What?" And then I go on Twitter and there's videos of him just burning sage. That's only something Kyrie would do.
Yeah, but I mean, it worked. They won by 30, so do your thing.
Yeah,
they look good. So I mean, if they can keep it together, they're going to be a really good team, like we all thought.
Yeah.
But it's just what Kyrie said last year, just about who he wanted to keep on the team. He literally said who he wanted to keep. And a couple of the names that weren't on there, Jared Allen wasn't on there. I don't think Joe Harris was on there.
He wasn't.
And those are 2 very, really key guys for that team. So it's just very interesting to kind of see how his mind works, because either he forgot them or he just doesn't want them there. But it's going to be a very confusing and difficult season for the Brooklyn Nets, I think.
Well, here's the other thing. I think you have to consider. You have, like you said, this team from top to bottom, just on paper, looking at the roster alone, even the coaching staff, even though it's an inexperienced coaching staff in terms of Amari Stoudemire and Steve Nash. I mean, Steve Nash is a former MVP. If it weren't for the Lakers, they would have won a title. So it's not like Steve he knows what he's doing offensively. You got Mike D'Antoni, who was coaching Steve Nash during that time.
Yeah.
Is responsible for some of the Knicks' greatest moments. Obviously, James Harden and the Rockets. So he's not bad. He's just not a good coach. Reminds me of Jay Gruden, so to speak. When you look at Jay Gruden in the NFL, Jay Gruden's better off a coordinator than a coach, and we're seeing that, and we're seeing why. He would not have the Washington football team where they are right now. Nonetheless, I say all that to say this: when you look at Kevin Durant, who's a former MVP, a former 2-time champion, 2-time Finals MVP, Kawhi Leonard's got a championship. Yeah, he doesn't have a Finals MVP. He's never got a whiff of an MVP conversation ever. So there's that as well. You've never ever seen Kawhi Leonard on anybody's anything in reference to being an MVP candidate, not the preseason, not after 1 month, 4 months, whatever. Like he's never appeared on anybody's list of MVP. So when you look at that, but he's holding himself as if he is, and I think that's the issue. And it goes back to the ego. It may very well be the downfall of the Nets. When you look at the Celtics, and I've drawn from this several times, when you look at the Celtics in 2018, the Celtics were in the Eastern Conference Finals with the Cavs, LeBron-led Cavs, a team that we've seen since LeBron has been gone has been nothing but hot garbage. They were in the Eastern Conference Finals and forced LeBron games and that team to 7 games without the presence of Kyrie Irving. Yeah. So it's not like Kyrie is going to teams and making them better. And in fact, it's more like Kyrie Irving is leaving teams and making them better. And what I mean by that is when Kyrie's not on the floor in big time moments, the team's doing so much better. And again, we saw that in that playoff run. You go to the Eastern Conference Finals without your best player, and you force 7 games on a guy who, in my opinion, is the greatest of all time. Now, granted, he didn't really have much of a supporting cast, but still, it's basically 5-on-1 up and down the floor because he's having to drop 40 and 50 every game just to get the win. So when you look at it from that regard, you got to look at Kyrie and say, obviously, we're not expecting you to lead, but we are expecting you to do your job. And your job as a part of the Brooklyn Nets is number one, to show up to your media day and talk to the media. It's a contractual. It's what you're supposed to do. Your job is also to go on the court and put on the show that you know that you can put on and get a championship to Brooklyn alongside Kevin Durant. He can't do that if he's too busy worried about his ego, the shape of the world, or who can and cannot hit clutch shots. Yeah. Like he's focused on the wrong things. And like I said, that'll ultimately be the demise of the Nets this season and next season and every other season until Kyrie can figure out that he's the problem and it's not everyone else. It's him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be like we said, it's gonna be a weird season for them, and it's up to them to figure out if they can do this because they're going to be a team that can arguably easily make it to the second or third round. And if I was to pick someone to get to the finals, I would pick the Nets because they just have that experience and that firepower. You look at the Heat and they're still a really good team, but offensively, they're a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
The Nets have that offense. They have a good defense. So I think going forward, I would choose the Nets, but we'll see. I mean, it's going to be a really weird season, I think.
I agree with you 100%. Now, I mean, and again, we've touched on this a bit throughout the course of the show. I just want to talk about really quickly, just the Lakers, and how monumentally better they've gotten. I mean, never before in NBA history have we seen an NBA champion get better, right? I mean, you look at Kevin Durant joining the Warriors. That was after the Warriors lost in the finals, right? I mean, you look at the Raptors, for all intents and purposes, they kind of got worse with the loss of Kawhi. So very rarely do you see a championship team that just won the championship get better. You look at the Lakers, they add Montrezl Harrell, who won 6 Men of the Year last year from the Clippers. They add Dennis Schroeder, who had a pretty good season in OKC last season. You're adding Marc Gasol, who's a former Defensive Player of the Year. He was also involved on that championship team with Kawhi Leonard in Toronto 2 years ago. So when you look, I mean, Wesley Matthews, guys that can really just get down and dirty. They deepen their bench. They strengthen their starting five. This is a team that, for all intents and purposes, no matter who comes out of the East, it's a sweep. Like anything short of going 16-0 in the playoffs this season, I think would be a shock for me personally. Now, I don't think anyone's expecting them to sweep their way through the final. Yeah. But if you wake up, if you happen to wake up and you look and say, they swept them, they swept them, they swept them. It wouldn't be a surprise to see them 16-0. Yeah. It wouldn't be a surprise at all. I don't think anyone's expecting it though. I think someone's expecting a little bit similar to what happened, last season with a 4-1, a 4-1, a 4-1, and a 4-2. But a 16-0 finish to the finals, to the championship again, by no means a shock. The other thing I will say too is, And I don't know if you agree with me or this, but I think we've talked about this a little bit. I think this would be the first time. I think this would be a first time in a long time that LeBron James is not like consistently in the MVP discussion from a month to month, week to week, game to game basis this season. I think he is starting to, and we saw bits of this last season in the playoffs. He's starting to let AD run the offense a little bit more. I mean, obviously the ball's going through him, but he's letting he's letting AD cook. He's letting AD be AD. He's getting AD to his spots, getting him those clutch shots, things like that. He's still going to give you 27 and 7. He might even give you a triple double. I wouldn't be surprised if he's giving you like, I don't know, 20, I don't know, maybe like 20, 10 and 10, 25, 10 and 10, something like that.
Yeah.
He's going to improve that. He led the league in assists last season. So he's going to keep improving there. He's obviously going to get you those boards. He's going to give you those points. Now, that doesn't mean that in a close game, LeBron's not going to turn it on. We know he can turn it on offensively and defensively. We know he has that switch where he can turn it off and turn it on. So, but when I look at LeBron, when I look at that team, LeBron doesn't have to do so much this season to win the championship unless, like, say, I don't know, knock on wood, like AD goes down or Marc Gasol goes down with injury, something like that. Other than that, though, we're going to see a very similar season to last season where LeBron is being steady, and the closer the playoffs get, the better he gets, and that it's going to rise. But I don't think we're going to see him as a consistent, and I think he's going to peek his head in and out of it, obviously. I don't think he's going to be a consistent from start to finish, game 1 to 72, an MVP candidate throughout.
Yeah, and I have to agree. I mean, Anthony Davis has kind of turned a corner in his career. He looked amazing last night. He looked amazing all last season. He looked phenomenal through the finals.
Yeah.
And I agree. I think this is going to be LeBron's year. We kind of takes that step back, not even regressing, but willingly takes a step back so that Anthony Davis can kind of take the throne in LA. And the Lakers are going to be really good this year. We said, we've never seen a team get this much better. They have two of the Six Man of the Year award winners.
Right.
Montrez obviously won the award. Dennis Schroeder was the runner-up. So
yeah, he was the runner-up last season. Yeah,
it's amazing that they were able to get these guys and for cheap. The Lakers gave up a first-round pick that isn't going to be worth much because it's going to be in the late anyways. And Schroeder's a hell of a player. He's good offensively, defensively he's all right, but he's exactly what that team needs. And I mean Montrez, that's just like cherry on top right there. Like, he is a dog no matter where you put him. He just wants to win. And at the end of the day, that's the reason he left. He wants to win. And he knows that the Lakers give him the best chance.
I think the beauty of it too is, again, a lot of the guys that they grabbed, I would say, aside from obviously Marc Gasol and Dennis Schroeder, everyone else is going to be on the bench. Yeah. And one of the biggest questions about the Lakers last season was their bench. Now, they had one of the better benches in the league, but this is a league that we got a really top-heavy league right now. This is a league that is really top-heavy. There's not a lot of teams that have sustained bench. Now, I mean, you can look at the Clippers, who've had one of the better benches recently, but again, they don't have Trez. Their bench last season was okay, but when you really get down to it, like, their bench is really Lou Williams, essentially. That's all their bench has been. Yeah. If Lou Williams isn't on, their bench isn't on. Like, Patrick Beverley is not, like, he holds himself like he's like the best point guard in the league. I don't know who told him that. Whoever told him that should be like locked up, prisoned, jailed, whatever, because that's a crime that they committed, telling him he's the best point guard in the league. Nonetheless, though, I mean, you look at that Lakers bench: Montrezl Harrell, Wesley Matthews. Obviously you still have Alex Caruso, all those guys. Kyle Kuzma, I think, will probably come
Talon Hart-Tucker,
right? Who's been playing the lights out in the preseason THT. So, this is a team that, like we said, never have you seen a championship team get better, like so much better, to the point where, like, the team before would lose in a game to the team now. Like that's what we're looking at right now. And I think that's what's going to make the Lakers so scary. There is anything short of a victory in the finals this season, obviously, would be a massive shock. Even if they make it to the finals and lose, even if it's to the Nets, that'd be a massive shock to everyone in the basketball world. Everyone is expecting a victory for the Lakers in the finals this season, maybe even the season after. So my finals matchup as it stands right now, I have the Lakers and the Nets. Like 2 weeks ago, I had the Lakers and the Celtics. So it is ever fluctuating, but the one thing that is staying constant is the Los Angeles Lakers are definitely going back to the finals this season.
Yeah. I'm gonna disagree because I got my Warriors. No, I'm just kidding. I got the Lakers. I got the Lakers getting to the finals, and I also have the Nets. I think the Nets are just, they're gonna be fun to watch.
Absolutely.
And we can't forget about the Heat. I think the Heat are gonna be really good this year. Jimmy Butler's ever so motivated. Bam's gonna continue to just kind of tap into his potential. And if they somehow get James Harden for Tyler Hero, even more of a just a more complete team, because what they were missing last year was an offensive mastermind.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. But even then, if Tyler Hero can progress and kind of tap into his potential, he could become an offensive mastermind by the end of the season. We don't know. But I'm excited for this season, I think. But the Lakers are definitely going to be the ones that I think make the finals for sure.
Absolutely. Now, the last thing I know, I said that was the last thing. I just thought about this.
Yeah.
So, when you look at the Warriors, who won the title in 2015, and then again in 17 and 18, and then would have won it 2019 if it weren't for the injuries, obviously. Although some would argue that they still would have lost. I'm not. I'm of the belief if Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson were healthy, the Warriors would have three-peated.
Yeah.
When you look at that and you look at the circumstances, obviously last season was a bust because Steph and Klay were both, down with injuries.
Yeah.
Look at this season, this season, I think the ceiling is the 8th seed for the Warriors without Klay. So looking at next season with everyone being back healthy, strong, chances are the Warriors are going to have another lottery pick this season, maybe. We'll have to see. I mean, Steph, like you said earlier, has been playing lights out in the preseason, but you never know. They have a decent pick in the draft, that's for sure, especially if they don't make the playoffs. So
I think they're going to have one either way. Minnesota's not going to be a playoff team.
Yeah, the Minnesota pick, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at all that and you see what they have, obviously James Wiseman, we'll see how he does this season. Take all that in consideration. Obviously, I don't think the championship window is closed in Golden State. I think it's closing. I don't think it's closed. When you look at that, do you consider the Warriors dynasty to be over, or do you think because of the fact that there's a chance of a title next season that the dynasty is still very much alive?
The fan in me says no. But I mean, to be realistic, even then, I don't think it's going to be over because you can never count out Steph. Steph has been one of those guys that just performs no matter what. And I really, really was happy with the aggressiveness this offseason. Kelly Oubre is going to be a guy that we rely on heavily this year. He's a 20-point scorer. We've seen that last season.
Absolutely.
Wiggins was grinding all offseason, so I'm excited for him. I'm hoping that he kind of puts it together. But Wiseman has been raved about all preseason. Through training camp, people have been saying wow, this guy's really good. And I'm counting on those young guys, Eric Pascal, Jordan Poole, to just progress. Jordan Poole looked really good during the preseason. Eric Pascal played 2 games, so not much that we've seen there, but
yeah.
And I'm expecting Draymond to play better because he was very frustrating to watch last season just by himself. But yeah, I'm gonna say that the dynasty is not over. I think maybe take a 2-year hiatus from making the playoffs. But even this year, I think they could easily hit that 5th, 6th seed if they just all play well. It's really gonna just determine on how Wiggins plays. I think he's the huge X factor in this whole thing.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Other thing we'll say about Draymond last season is you look at Draymond and one of the reasons why he wasn't Draymond is because he was the guy on the floor. We've never seen Draymond in a situation. He's the guy on the floor. Draymond is best as the vocal leader. I say this all the time. Draymond is not the best player on the team. That's obviously Steph. He is the most important player on that team, though.
Yeah.
Draymond, when you're watching the games, you can hear Draymond, on defense, on offense, calling the shots, motivating his guys in the huddles, in practice. So, Draymond is the vocal leader of that group. That is without question. That's without a doubt. And again, like I said, Steph's the best player on that team. Everybody knows that. Now, there are some nights when Klay's the best player on the team. You know what he can do when he's healthy with the ball in his hands, with the ball not in his hands. He can drop 60. He can drop 60 on you in 33 quarters. He can drop 60 on you, only dribbling the ball like 4 times. So, you know what Steph can do. You know what Klay can do. But Draymond is definitely the most important player on that team. And I think the reason why he regressed so much last season was because he was the guy. And he hasn't been the guy since Michigan State. And so being into that role that he plays, he's such a Swiss Army knife. You need him to crash the boards. He's going to crash the boards. You need him to play defense. He's going to play defense. He's a former defensive player of the year. You need him to hit shots from deep. He's going to hit those shots from deep. He's going to do what you need him to do to get that win. And I think that's why he's most important. But I agree with you 100%. I don't think the dynasty's over. I think, like I said, the window is closing. I think the Warriors are slowly closing on the dynasty. I think I would say, because when you have to look at it, I think you would consider, and here's how I look at it. You would consider the Bulls, even though it was 3 years between the 3rd chip and the 4th chip. You would consider all of those years, all 9 of them, including the 3 when Jordan was gone. I think you would consider all 3 of those a dynasty. That's not 2 separate dynasties. That's all together. That whole 9 years, it's all together. So when I look at it from that regard, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, they were in the finals 2 years ago. So that's obviously going to be included. And then, they missed the playoffs last year because of injury. They're not going to make the finals this year. So you're looking at next year, you got Klay back. They're going to be a threat. They're going to be a threat for sure. And so it's not like it's impossible for them to win a championship. What I will say also is this: the beauty about Steph and Klay is they're not athletic at all.
Yeah.
They're not dunkers. They're not explosive really. So as long as they're healthy, we saw this with Ray Allen. As long as you're and even Kyle Korver to an extent, when you're a shooter of that caliber, when you don't really need the ball in your hand, where you're not like barreling down the floor, 20 miles an hour, dunking the ball, being explosive, you're going to get your money, of course. You're always going to be dangerous, because no matter what, Steph and Klay are always going to be a threat behind from deep. Steph is always going to be a threat to drop 30 shooting just threes. Klay is always going to be a threat to drop 60 on you in 3 quarters or whatever the number is, So because they're not athletic. And I think that's really the beauty of the construct of the Warriors when you look at it from that regard. So whether you want to argue whether or not the dynasty is over or not, even if the dynasty does come to an end, I think we could see the Warriors poke their head back up and win another championship, especially once LeBron is gone. Yeah. I think while LeBron is still in the Lakers uniform, that makes it difficult because they're going to have to get through LeBron to get to the finals. LeBron, with an exception of 2019, which was the 1 year he had a major injury, excuse me, in terms of that groin injury. But you look at LeBron, he had them as the 4th seed before going down with that injury, and then he misses 19 games, and now they're the 9th seed. Just come back from that with not so many games left, but. I say that to say as long as LeBron's there, the Lakers are going to be in the finals every year, and that's just the way that LeBron is. He spent 57% of his career in the finals. He knows how to get them. He knows how to win them. So once LeBron is out of there, though, the Lakers will still be dangerous, obviously, because they'll still have Anthony Davis, presumptually. But the Warriors, again, because of that lack of athleticism on the team, there's no doubt in my mind the Lakers make it back to the finals within the next 3 to 5 years, winning in that time range. And now you're looking at another situation where, similar to the Lakers, they've had several dynasties. Same thing can be said for the Warriors. But the Warriors will always be dangerous because of Steph and Klay. I think that's the most lethal backcourt in NBA history. I don't think there's another backcourt in this generation, the generation before, or the generation before that, that could argue that they got a better backcourt, a guard tandem than Steph Curry and Klay Thompson.
Yeah.
So the last, I keep saying this, I just keep coming up with more stuff. This is what happened last time. This is what happened last time. No, but this really is the last thing. I do want to ask, when you're looking at the Suns, because the Suns have been the talk of the town recently
Yeah.
with the acquisition of Chris Paul. You look at that preseason matchup, you know, uh, losing only by 1 point to the Lakers. Obviously, it's the preseason, but nonetheless, it is something to look at. Look at the way that team is running. Obviously, you know, there's a little bit of concern without Kelly Oubre, so that's obviously a big hit. The Suns, where do you have the Suns in terms of their ceiling? What do you think the ceiling is for the Suns?
7 or 6. I think as good as they're gonna be, they're still missing a lot of defense.
Yeah.
Chris Paul and Mikal Bridges are two really good perimeter defenders, like we've seen. But DeAndre Ayton has been a pretty bad defender for his career. That's the only hit on him. Offensively, he's gifted. We've seen that. Devin Booker is one of the best scorers in the NBA.
The only active player right now to have scored 70.
Yep, exactly. But defensively, Devin Booker is not good. And I don't even know who their power forward is right now. I know they got rid of Frank Kaminsky. Aaron Baines is gone.
I think it's Jay Crowder. Is Jay Crowder? I think it's
yeah,
Jay.
yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
Jay Crowder is good, but I don't think he has enough defensively to take care of those big guys, the ADs, the James Wiseman's in this era. Clint Capella is gonna be able to get right over him, because he's only like 6'6", 6'7". He's a small guy for a big.
He's like 6'8", 230, 240. Yeah. He's definitely the size 4.
Yeah, but he's a very, very good shooter.
Yeah,
like we've seen in the playoffs last year. He's going to be someone that elevates their team, and I arguably think that was the best acquisition that they could have made through this whole thing, other than Chris Paul, obviously. But the Suns had a very good offseason, but I'm not taking a knock on them at all because, like, that's just how good the West is. There is not just 8 good teams in the West. There's like 10 or 11 good teams in the West. So good teams are going to get snubbed this season.
Absolutely.
And it's going to be tough. But what do you think?
I think the beauty of the Suns right now, the acquisition of Chris Paul, even if he doesn't stay long term, which, you know, he obviously has more games behind him than he is ahead of him. The championship window for the Suns opens next season. I believe that 100%. Not this upcoming, the season after this season. I mean, I definitely believe that the championship window opens up at 21. And the reason why I say that is, again, look at Devin Booker, the only guy in NBA right now active player to have scored over 70. When you're looking at DeAndre Ayton, who, like you said, he's a defensive liability, but he's going to crash those boards. He's going to get you some blocks, and he's also going to, you know, he can give you 20, 25 a game. You got Chris Paul, who one of the best passers in the league. He's got an amazing offensive IQ. He's another guy where he in the paint. So when I take all of that into consideration, I'm looking at this. You know, you got Jay Crowder, who again, like you said, he's not a consistent shooter, but if he's open, he's going to hit the shot. And he's not a great defender, but he can definitely get the job done. So when I take all that in consideration, I'm looking at the Suns and I'm saying, you know, obviously no one's expecting the Suns to compete with the Lakers this season. That's not the expectation at all. But next season and the season after that, I mean, depending on what they can do in free agency with the money, I think, you know, obviously Devin Booker and there's some guys that's going to, you know, have money coming up, obviously. But when you look at what they got, they can definitely make some moves around, get one of those, you know, those solid role players coming off the bench, really build that team around. That's going to be a big threat. So I think the championship window opens in 21, and if not in 22, at least by 22, if not 21, we're going to be looking at the Suns about 2022 season saying, hey, yo, this is a team that can really, really compete, especially, and I would say with or without Chris Paul. I think in 2022, just because of the trajectory of Devin Booker, because of the trajectory of Mikal Bridges, because of the trajectory of DeAndre Ayton, I'd say, obviously with Chris Paul, that, you know, raises the likelihood, because it means that Devin Booker can do more without the ball in his hands. Even though he will be the primary target, the primary offensive threat, I still look at him and I say 2021, 22, around that time, that's when the championship window opens. Phoenix, especially when you consider that that's around the time when LeBron's contract is expiring. So obviously you still have the Lakers. But again, if there's no LeBron, if LeBron decides to hang it up at that point, I think the West just opens back up again, even though you still have the Nuggets in Denver. You still got, Luka and Kristaps down in Dallas. You still have the Rockets and whatever they're going to be doing. So you still have all those teams. But I'm still looking at the Suns and I'm saying they're definitely going to be a team that's going to be able to compete for those top spots, be in a position like a 4 or 5 seed that make the finals. I mean, it's happened before. It's not far-fetched to believe that a 4 seed or a 5 seed can make the playoffs. Make the finals. We saw the Mavericks, who were underdogs in every series that they were in. They won the championship in 2011, and that's really what I'm looking at in terms of the Suns and what they'd be able to do in these upcoming seasons as they continue to get better and become more competitive. And again, it's just the preseason, but losing to the defending champions 114 to 113, preseason or not, that's definitely something when you look at and you say, hey, that's good for our team. That's good for our offense. And that's good momentum going into the season, which starts next
3 days.
Tuesday. Yeah, next Tuesday is when the season starts. Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, you look at the schedule for opening day. If I can find it, they've got a pretty solid schedule for opening day. Obviously, you have the Clippers and the Lakers going up. In fact, opening night, you got the Warriors and the Nets. And then you got the Clippers and the Lakers. So that's when the season starts. So I'm looking forward to it. I know you're looking forward to it. Your Warriors playing at 7 against the Nets. That's going to be a big game. KD, going to be. Is that in Golden State? I think it is.
No, it's in Brooklyn.
Brooklyn.
Warriors start out with a long road trip.
That's going to be his first game against Golden State. So that's going to be an interesting game to watch. And then, of course, the Lakers and Clippers, that's definitely going to be an interesting game to watch in terms of what they've been able to do. So I do want to thank you for joining me today to talk a little bit of basketball.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course. To all my viewers, don't be sure to check out Spencer's podcast, Full Court Talk. I'll include the links in the description below so you can check out his podcast and his Instagram page. You can check out all the cool stuff that he's doing talking basketball. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, click the notification bell, share with your family and friends. Again, Spencer, thank you for coming on.
Of course, man. Thank you.
We'll be sure to have you right back on real soon to talk some more basketball. As the season progresses, we get closer and closer to the playoffs and the finals. And as I always say, thank you for watching. And you guys enjoy the rest of your lives.